Try to imagine a world where nothing does not exist. Not emptiness, not darkness, not silence, nothing. A world where every quantity must be something, where absence cannot be named, where you can count objects but you cannot describe what happens when they are gone. You have 3 sheep, you sell them all. How many sheep do you have? For most of human history, this was not a question. It was a paradox. Early civilizations could count, trade, measure, and build, yet they had no way to represent absence. They could describe not many, or there is none, but they could not write it. They could not calculate with it. They could not think with it as a thing because nothing was not neutral. Nothing was dangerous. To ancient minds, nothingness felt wrong. How could something come from nothing? How could nothing be real? In many cultures, nothing was associated with chaos, death, or the divine. It was not a number. It was a void, and voids were terrifying, so humans avoided it. They built entire systems of mathematics, astronomy, and commerce without ever allowing nothing to exist as an idea. Roman numerals had no zero. Greek mathematics had no placeholder for absence. Early accounting systems skipped empty positions entirely, and yet, these civilizations achieved extraordinary things. They built empires, mapped the stars, engineered monuments, created philosophy and law, all without nothing. This raises a disturbing question. If ancient civilizations could function without zero, without nothing, then why did inventing it change everything? Why did one simple idea unlock modern science, advanced mathematics, computers, and the digital world? And why did humans resist it for so long? The invention of nothing was not a discovery. It was an act of courage, because to accept nothing, humans had to do something radical. They had to treat absence as presence. They had to give emptiness a symbol. They had to allow a void to sit beside everything else and count. This single shift rewired how humans think. It changed how we measure time, how we understand space, how we describe infinity, how we build machines, how we imagine the universe itself, and it nearly didn't happen. For centuries, nothing was rejected, feared, mocked, and dismissed as nonsense. Scholars argued against it, philosophers condemned it, entire mathematical traditions tried to work around it. The idea was too strange, too abstract, too unsettling, because once you allow nothing to exist, truly exist, you open the door to everything that comes after. Negative numbers, algebra, calculus, infinity, binary logic. Civilization crossed an invisible line the moment it accepted that nothing could be something. This is not the story of a number, it is the story of the most dangerous idea humanity ever invented, and how, once unleashed, it changed everything. Nothing did not appear everywhere at once. It emerged slowly, in one place, under very specific conditions. And when it did, it didn't arrive as a triumph. It arrived quietly, almost accidentally. The earliest known symbol for zero did not come from Greece or Rome. It did not emerge from the great philosophical centers of the ancient Mediterranean. Those cultures were deeply uncomfortable with the idea of nothingness. Greek thinkers debated the nature of being and non-being, but they never accepted nothing as a usable number. Roman mathematics focused on practicality, not abstraction, and their numeral system simply skipped empty space. The breakthrough came elsewhere. In ancient India, by around the 5th century CE, Indian mathematicians began using a small dot to mark absence in calculations. At first, it was not a number, it was a placeholder, a way to say, there's nothing in this position. But placeholders have power. Once absence could be written, it could be manipulated. Indian scholars did something no civilization had done before. They allowed nothing to sit inside numbers. They treated emptiness as a legitimate part of calculation. This was revolutionary. It meant that numbers could grow infinitely large without inventing new symbols. It meant that position mattered. It meant that mathematics became scalable, flexible, and abstract in ways never before possible. But even then, nothing was not yet complete. It was still fragile. The idea spread slowly, carried by traders, scholars, and translations. It moved west through the Islamic world, where mathematicians and astronomers recognized its power. They refined it, formalized it, and gave it rules. What happens when you add nothing, subtract nothing, multiply by nothing? These questions sound simple now. They were once explosive. By the time zero reached Europe in the Middle Ages, it was deeply controversial. Many merchants distrusted it. Churches questioned it. Some cities even banned its use in accounting, fearing fraud and deception. Why? Because zero made numbers slippery. It allowed debts to exist on paper. It enabled abstract calculations beyond physical objects. It created a gap between what could be seen and what could be written. Zero made reality negotiable. This frightened people. For centuries, Europe clung to older systems. Roman numerals felt safer. They were concrete, visible, tangible. You could count what you saw. Zero required faith, not religious faith, but conceptual faith. You had to believe in something that represented nothing. Eventually, the logic was unstoppable. Once zero was accepted, mathematics accelerated. Algebra emerged. Astronomy advanced, engineering became precise. Timekeeping improved, navigation transformed. The world became calculable in ways never before imagined. But none of this was inevitable. Zero was not discovered because humans were ready. It was accepted because a few thinkers were willing to tolerate the unsettling idea that nothing could exist and matter. The resistance to zero was not mathematical. It was psychological. For most of human history, numbers were tied to physical reality. You counted sheep, jars of grain, bricks, days, stars. Numbers described things you could point to, touch, or see. Even large numbers were still something. Zero broke that relationship. It described the absence of things yet demanded to be treated as real. This felt deeply unnatural. In ancient thought, existence and non-existence were not neutral concepts. They carried moral, philosophical, and sometimes spiritual weight. To say that nothing exists sounded like a contradiction. To write it down as a number felt like an error, or worse, a lie. Greek philosophers struggled with this idea. Aristotle argued that nothingness could not exist in reality. If nothing truly existed, he reasoned, it would be something which was impossible. This logic shaped Western thinking for centuries. As a result, Greek mathematics avoided zero entirely. It excelled in geometry and ratios, in describing form and proportion, but it resisted abstraction that had no physical anchor. Roman culture inherited this mindset. Roman numerals worked well for counting objects and recording transactions, but they had no place for absence. There was no symbol for nothing here. Empty positions were simply skipped. Calculations were cumbersome, but they felt honest. Zero, by contrast, felt dangerous. It allowed a symbol to stand in for emptiness. It allowed numbers to exist without objects. It allowed calculation without physical reference. This created suspicion. In medieval Europe, merchants were among the first to encounter zero through Arabic numerals. Many distrusted it immediately. A mark that represented nothing could be altered easily. A zero could turn 10 into 100. Accounts could be manipulated. Some cities banned its use in official records. But the fear went deeper than fraud. Zero threatened how people understood reality itself. If nothing could be written, then absence could be counted. If absence could be counted, then loss could be calculated. If loss could be calculated, then debt could exist without physical exchange. This was profoundly unsettling in societies built on tangible value. Even theologians weighed in. The idea of nothingness raised questions about creation, existence, and divine power. If nothing could be treated as something, where did that leave the idea of creation from nothing? Zero did not just change mathematics, it destabilized worldviews. Accepting zero meant accepting abstraction. It meant trusting symbols more than senses. It meant allowing the mind to operate independently of physical reality. That shift takes time. Civilizations resist ideas not because they are wrong, but because they are disruptive. Zero was disruptive in the most intimate way possible. It changed how humans thought, and once thought changes, everything else follows. This is why zero was feared, not because it was useless, but because it was too powerful. Once zero was accepted, the world did not change overnight. It accelerated. For the first time, humans could build mathematical systems that were not tied to physical objects. Numbers became flexible. They could expand, contract, disappear, and reappear. Calculation was no longer limited by what could be seen or counted. This was the moment mathematics stopped describing the world and started modeling it. With zero, positional notation became powerful. The difference between 10, 100, and 1000 was no longer a matter of inventing new symbols. It was a matter of place. A single mark could change everything. This seems obvious now. It was revolutionary then. Zero made algebra possible. Equations could represent unknowns. Problems could be solved symbolically rather than physically. This allowed thinkers to explore relationships, patterns, and structures that did not exist as objects, only as ideas. Astronomy transformed. With zero, calculations of planetary motion became precise. Time could be divided consistently. Calendars improved. Navigation became more accurate. The heavens, once interpreted symbolically, became measurable. Engineering followed. Architects could calculate load, balance, and proportion with greater accuracy. Complex structures became safer. Systems could be scaled. Repetition became reliable. Then came the most radical shift of all. Zero allowed for negative numbers. Once you could count nothing, you could count less than nothing. Debt, deficit, and loss became calculable. This changed economics forever. Trade expanded. Credit systems formed. Financial abstraction became possible. But zero's influence did not stop there. Centuries later, the same idea would power computation. Binary logic, the foundation of modern computers, is built entirely on the distinction between something and nothing, on and off, one and zero, presence and absence. Every digital system in existence traces its logic back to this conceptual leap. The idea that nothing could be something. This is why zero was not just another number. It was a gateway. It allowed humanity to move beyond counting objects and into understanding systems. It enabled prediction, simulation, and abstraction. It reshaped how knowledge itself was structured. Science became experimental. Mathematics became universal. Technology became scalable. None of this required new tools. It required a new idea, and that idea was nothing. The most powerful engine of progress in human history was not fire, the wheel, or writing alone. It was the moment humans allowed absence to exist inside thought. Once that door opened, it could not be closed. The world became measurable in new dimensions. Reality itself became something that could be modeled, tested, and transformed. All because humanity learned to live with nothing. The true impact of zero was not mathematical. It was mental. Before zero, human thinking was anchored to presence. Knowledge was built from what existed, what could be observed, counted, or experienced. Even abstract ideas were tied, in some way, to physical reality. Zero broke that anchor. For the first time, the human mind was asked to operate comfortably in absence, to think about what is not there and treat it as meaningful. This was a profound cognitive shift. Accepting zero required a new kind of trust in symbols. A symbol no longer had to point to an object. It could point to a condition, an empty space, a potential, a loss, a future state. This ability changed how humans reasoned. With zero, humans learned to think in terms of systems rather than objects. They could imagine balance, equilibrium, cancellation, and neutrality. They could conceptualize beginnings and endings with precision. Time itself became different. Calendars could be standardized. Moments could be divided evenly. Intervals could be measured from a neutral point. Space changed to coordinates required reference points. Zero allowed space to be mapped symmetrically. Directions gained meaning. Navigation became abstract rather than intuitive. Perhaps most importantly, zero reshaped how humans dealt with uncertainty. Before zero, uncertainty was vague. Something was unknown, missing, or unclear. After zero, uncertainty could be quantified. Risks could be calculated. Losses could be predicted. Futures could be modeled. This altered decision-making. Trade became strategic rather than transactional. Planning replaced reaction. Prediction became a skill. The human mind began to operate one step removed from immediate reality. Thought moved inward into models, symbols, and representations. This shift was not without cost. Abstraction creates distance. Numbers begin to matter more than people. Models replace lived experience. Systems feel real even when they fail individuals. Zero made bureaucracy possible. It made accounting powerful. It made large-scale coordination manageable. But it also introduced a gap between human intuition and symbolic reality. People could now owe something without ever receiving it. Value could exist without material form. Decisions could be justified mathematically, even when they felt wrong. In this sense, zero did not just expand human capability, it changed human responsibility. Once humans learned to think in absence, they gained power over systems larger than themselves. They could design economies, technologies, and institutions that operated independently of any single person's experience. This is the legacy of zero. It taught the human mind to accept the invisible, to reason about what cannot be seen, to trust abstraction. The world we live in, scientific, digital, interconnected, depends on this ability. But it began with a simple, unsettling lesson, that nothing can matter. The invention of zero did not arrive with celebration. There was no announcement, no monument, no moment when humanity knew it had crossed a line. And yet, it did. Because zero did not change what humans could see, it changed what they could imagine. Before nothing was accepted, the world was bounded by presence. Reality was defined by what existed, what could be counted, touched, or observed. After zero, reality gained a shadow, a structured absence that could be measured, manipulated, and trusted. This was the most dangerous shift of all. Not because it destroyed old knowledge, but because it made new kinds of knowledge possible. Once absence could be represented, humans could build systems that no longer depended on physical reference. They could calculate futures. They could design mechanisms larger than themselves. They could manage complexity at scales never before possible. Civilizations transformed. Empires tracked resources. Economies expanded beyond barter. Science replaced description with prediction. Technology scaled beyond intuition. All because nothing was allowed to exist. But zero also revealed a deeper truth about human progress. The most powerful ideas are rarely the loudest. They are often the quiet ones. We resist the longest. Fire was dramatic. The wheel was visible. Writing left marks in stone. Zero left a gap, and humanity had to learn to trust it. Even today, we live inside the consequences of that decision. Every digital system runs on absence and presence. Every calculation depends on a neutral point. Every model assumes that nothing is meaningful. We rarely think about this, because zero has become invisible, but invisibility is its greatest power. The world did not change the day. Humans invented nothing because nothing looked small. It was just a symbol, just a mark, just a placeholder. Yet it rewired how the mind relates to reality. It taught us that meaning does not require substance, that systems can operate beyond perception, that the unseen can shape everything we see. This is why zero matters more than most inventions. It was not a tool, it was a permission. Permission to think abstractly, to model the invisible, to build worlds inside the mind before shaping them in reality. Civilization did not advance because humans added more, it advanced because they learned how to handle less. And in doing so, they unlocked everything that came after. The most dangerous idea humanity ever accepted was not power, fire, or knowledge. It was nothing.